Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all here today with us. I'm Vivian, and I'm the chair of today's sessions. So I'm from 36KR Global. We are the overseas business group from 36KR, the largest Chinese tech media. And our mission is to create the global innovation platforms and gathering all parties on our platform to discuss, to share, and also to make innovation cooperation happen through our platforms. And so we help people and enterprises to bridge the gap with the global innovation news, and also we help them to find the best partner through our platforms. As a result, I personally feel very privileged and honored to be here and to join the gala. So we believe that it's a tremendous opportunity for all of us to meet like-minded people and learning from our guest speakers about how we can build the smart cities. So let me briefly run through the sessions that we're going to do in the next following 2 hours. So first of all, we will have the keynote and also one conversations. And later, we will have a 15 minutes break for networking. And then after that, we'll have a panel for discussing about different models that be implemented into different cities. And I can assure you that with these themed sessions, you will be able to acquire the invaluable insights and the experience of how to put idea into implementation, and also what kind of the challenges that you may encounter when building smart cities. And our guest speakers can also provide you their experience and their suggestions when you of the problems that you encounter. So with that, let's give our full attention to our very first guest speakers, Mr. Celi, and the founder and the CEO of ESI ThoughtLab. And he has more than 35 years experience in marketing, research, and also publications. And he helped governments and also corporations to do business transformations and to make better decision making. And prior to the establishment of the lab, he is the director broader of the Oxford Economics. So now let's help me in welcoming Mr. Rowe to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm the CEO of ESI ThoughtLab, and as Vivian said, formerly with Oxford Economics and the Economist Intelligence Unit. And when I was at the Economist Intelligence Unit as the managing director, I hired this kid out of college in 1984. His name was Barack Obama. And he stayed with us for about a year, and he said, I don't think I should stay in business. I have something to do for the public sector. And I said, Barack, you're making a huge career mistake. You should not leave EIU. He did. He went to Chicago, he was a business leader, and the rest is history. So anyway, I don't know if you should listen to anything I'm saying today but on my forecast, but I will tell you about a study that we are just finishing. It's being released today. You have free access to all the results that I'm going to be telling you about. It's called Building a Hyperconnected City. We intentionally called it a hyperconnected city, not a smart city. And that's because it's not enough to use technology to do smart things. You have to use it to interconnect your ecosystem and to connect your stakeholders, particularly business with academia, citizens with government, communities to communities. So it's very important that it's, at the end of the day, it's all about people. Okay? Now, we worked with a group of companies who funded the research. We're happy to have them here, some of them in the room, Oracle's, Sue was in the room, and others, and we thank them all. We also had research partners. Professor from IESE is in the room, Professor Ricard, who does the very great Cities of Motion study. So we had a lot of help to do this study, but it was a very ambitious study because what we wanted to do is understand how cities were using technology to transform, interconnect, and even secure all parts of their city ecosystem and what kind of value they were getting. And I've been getting questions about economics and value. We're not just looking at fiscal value, we're looking at value from for the environment, for social. So when we think of as economists as value, we're thinking about measuring what it means in all those ways to build a more prosperous city for everyone. And what we did as part of this study is we did a benchmarking survey of 100 cities. Now we picked the cities that were already deemed smart. And we said, let's see what exactly they're doing to take it to the next level of smartness. How are they connecting up their environments, and which ones are getting the best results? And we looked at all cities across the spectrum, so smaller cities and larger cities. You could see from 123,000 all the way up to 24 million in Shanghai. It was a very international study. It covered North America, South America, Western Europe, Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Middle East. This is important because what this is a benchmarking study, and if you want to benchmark yourself, you have to look for like cities, same size, same issues, same location sometimes. Now, we defined hyperconnected cities for our index as not just using technology and data analytics, but also their advances in cybersecurity and connected citizens. If you're going to be a smart city, you need to be a secure city, particularly in these days of concerns about data privacy, and you also need to be a connected city with your citizens. There's so many cities that have had problems in the past because they didn't have their citizens on board. I would think that Toronto's Sidewalk Labs is an example of that. So you could have the greatest technology, but if you don't have people support, it's going to be hard to get your work done. So we looked at 3 stages of hyper-connected cities: implementers, those beginning, advances, those that are mature, and then the leaders, the one that are furthest ahead and showing the best results. So I'm going to show you the results of this study. These are some of the cities that we ranked in Singapore, Hong Kong, New York, Seoul, London, Melbourne. You know, they all did pretty well on this. Everyone's a winner on this one because these are all the top cities of the world. So I want to tell you about the path to hyper-connected future. That's very important. First of all, cities are using digital technologies, as we said, to transform and interconnect urban ecosystems. So what we found is that of the people that we surveyed, you know, the lion's share of them have Wi-Fi in their cities, IoT, they're using cloud, they're using mobility. Those are even table stakes. AI, blockchain, it doesn't mean they're using it in all areas, but they are starting to use all of these. Blockchain, I found that very interesting, that cities are using blockchain, even more so than in corporate studies that I found. And these trends are evolving, and this slide shows you where AI is being used now and in the next few years. And you can see it's already used pretty heavily in things like IT infrastructure, mobility, payment systems, and security systems, and blockchain as well. But you can see the trend is upward. And this is important. These are what are the innovation accelerators that sit above cloud and platforms. Now, hyper-connected cities run on data. Data is the oil for the 4th industrial revolution. We've heard those cliches, but it is true, and cities are using data. You can see right now they're using IoT, AI, real-time data, citizen satisfaction data, and in the future, the bottom of that list, you'll see where they will be increasing their use of data, crowdsourced data, geospatial data, to actually get a full picture of the city and what's happening in real time, behavioral data, predictive data. These are the data sources of the future. So, you know, the best cities run on data and are able to harness that data. Now, this slide, if there's one slide that you want to remember, it's this one, because this tells you the path to success. And people have said to me, there's no single path. Every city has its own problems, which is true, but there are some things that are common to hyper-connected cities. For one thing, they start with making the business case and the strategy and vision, and what outcomes they're looking for, what problems they're trying to solve. You've got to do that in a systematic way. Secondly, you want to calculate the full benefits. It's not just about fiscal benefits. You have to really be thinking about social benefits, environmental, and how you're going to measure how well you're doing there, that your plans are working. Organizing your resources, another very important issue. The cities that are furthest ahead actually are centralizing a lot of their resources for smart cities. A good amount of them are even having those smart city directors report right into the mayor's office. And capitalizing on advanced tech, we talked about. That's AI and everything else. The leaders are much further ahead in AI and blockchain than the followers. Ecosystems are the future of these cities. They're not going to do it alone. It's through partnerships. And it's about generating more value from data. The best cities in our sample were able to monetize even that data. And then finally, and most importantly, you have to ensure citizens are on board. You have to come up with ways that they are involved in the decision making up front, not as an afterthought. And communication is very important. In fact, the smartest cities that we find here are doing omni-channel communication and two-way communication. So let's just talk about the ROI. I just wanted to show you some of the numbers. Now, as you know, some of these are self-reported. We use secondary research as well. But this gives you the direction, okay? So first of all, hyper-connected cities boost ROI. Now, when I talk about ROI, it's not just financial, there's other parts to it. Not all cities measure ROI fully. So I want to just put that out there. These numbers will vary, but the main takeaway here is to see that, there's about a 3 to 4% return on investment, not even counting some of the social and environmental benefits that they're not measuring. So, many cities do this just for the social gains, let alone making a return on it. And some of the biggest returns, as you can see there, are things like on e-governance, where it's about a 4.1% return, and for leaders it's 5.6%. So you can see across the board, leaders are doing better than the implementers. In fact, as you move up this maturity curve from a beginner to a leader, you can actually see your ROI increase 2 to 3 times. And I just picked one. The study will show you this for lots of different areas of the city, but I picked one for today, public transit, and you can see, first of all, there are many benefits that don't even get fully measured, but are recorded here, which are increased passenger satisfaction, more on-time arrivals, things that improve the quality of life. But you can see the ROI, and so the ROI is not equal. The reason we do this economic research is you want to understand where to invest to get the best benefit for your stakeholders. So in this study, for example, it shows that digital public transit payment systems work very well. 72% of all the cities in our sample are actually employing that technique, and for leaders, it's showing a return of 6.5%, which is pretty high. Now, just to give you a broader picture, this tells you a little bit about the investments they're making in hyperconnected cities. The 1.2 trillion is the total investment in smart cities. It's a number from Technavio, it's not our number. In our study, we just looked at what the cities, the 100 that we surveyed, are doing, and the average about 1.4 billion in these kind of hyper-connected smart initiatives, and that comes down to about $1.2 thousand per citizen. So that's just to give you a frame of reference. But what's important is the multiplier effect. If you not just use technology to transform different aspects of your city, but use it to interconnect and involve citizens, you get this multiplier effect. And we reckon that if cities were to go hyper-connected, as some of the leaders did here, you would unlock $83 million per city. And if you added that up and did the math on the 1.2 trillion, that goes to $60 billion. So that's a lot of money that could be made. And that's not even counting all the social environmental benefits, which are a lot. I won't go through all the barriers now, but there are problems. The biggest problem I talked about, which is gaining support of citizens and other stakeholders. More than half the cities, and these are the smartest cities in the world, actually see that as an issue. So that really is a tough one. But there's other things, keeping up with the speed of development to meet the citizens' needs, the complexity of procurement, which can be daunting, and also the regulatory barriers and cybersecurity. So gaining support is challenging, but it is essential. So what was interesting is we asked which stakeholders are familiar with smart city activities. Business leaders, for the majority are. Elected officials, 2/3. But city employees and the average citizen, not so much. So that's where you want to concentrate as a city, more on employees, which people forget about, but you have to have them on board, and citizens. And you can see you're up against some challenges. We divided these cities from emerging market cities to industrial market cities, and 75% of the citizens in lower income kind of developing markets actually see innovation more beneficial for just the rich. And so there's a whole digital divide that's going on that cities have to address. The main thing is to ensure that cities are engaged and connected. Lots of people ask, how do they do that? Here are some of the techniques that are used. Reach out to demonstrate the value, engage them in surveys and get their input on products, do things particularly in their community to show them the value. There's a lot of ways that cities go about engaging their citizens. Some of them are even bringing in chief citizen experience officers. In the business world, there's now the chief customer experience officer. Now we have the citizen experience, and that's a way to engage by understanding how, not just what people want, but also their age, their demographics, their needs, their values, and put that all together in an experience that will be a happy one for them in the city. I want to just say a few things about cybersecurity, because as you become more hyper-connected, you also open up more risk. If you have a completely interconnected city, there are lots of points of threats. So, and you can see some of the vulnerabilities here. Physical and digital security, payment systems, infrastructure, mobility. You've heard about the problems of losses in Atlanta, in my part of the world, Baltimore, and it's something which we're going to see more of as the threat actors increase their activity and the vulnerabilities increase. The leaders in our study are very well prepared for cybersecurity attacks. They invest more. We talked about this with your next speaker, who was part of the CIO of Chicago. But cybersecurity is very important, and you see the advances and the implementers not doing so well, not very well prepared. So what happens is they have a break-in, then they decide to do something, and then it's too late. And you have to think about it. Cybersecurity should not be an afterthought for cities. It should be baked right into your smart city plans. And then, of course, you have to respond well to cyber risk. And people are doing things like hiring the best cybersecurity staff. They're creating a central pool of talent. They're investing more. Their investments are going up, in some cases beyond 10% in cybersecurity. And some are even adopting the NIST framework, which is very important. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And doing it, so for example, in California, the state has mandated that cities have to follow that approach. And so you could see here some of the increases. 28% of cities increased their cyber budgets by over 10%, and over 37% are going to do so in the future. The other big challenge that everyone talks about is the funding challenge. How am I going to finance this? I'd love to do all this for my city, but where am I going to find the money? Well, according to what we found, certainly you try to fund it out of your budget, and federal support can be valuable, but cities are getting much more innovative with financing. They're doing things like consumption-based financing, social impact bonds, privatization of assets, concession funding, pay for success. The list goes on, and it varies by the type of city, and it varies even by the underlying asset. And so, as you can see here, in transportation, lots of cities are using things like consumption-based financing, whereas in an area such as the environment, it may be more dependent on the local city budget. So it varies depending on how you're going to monetize it. So I just want to leave you with a few key best practices. And as part of this study, we actually interviewed and reviewed 10 smart cities around the world. Tel Aviv was one of them. They're doing a lot of amazing things. They're a good city to watch. They're a smaller city, 400,000 people or so. 200 of them are actually part of the Digitel system, which is a cool system for engaging citizens, for getting their feedback, for giving them benefits if you join up, and it gives them a reason to join up, and that way stay connected, because sometimes in some cities, people don't even use the apps, but they do here in Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv did a very interesting thing, I thought. They took all their departments, which were in silos, Department of Transportation, Department of the Environment and Energy and so forth, and they knocked down the silos so that they could share information through a data system. They created what they called champions across the system that can look at the city more in a holistic way. And then they started talking about the citizens as customers. So they took like a customer-obsessed mentality. And it's really, it changed the opinion, because when they started, the citizens were not on board and weren't that happy. So it's a good success story. And Vegas is another. It's a completely different success story, but we work with the CIO there. He's an innovative guy, and I think what he does really well is pilots. He works with one of our sponsors, NTT, but he has built a lot of activity and innovation through piloting with business and companies, and he thinks it's a really great way to make decisions, because he can make decisions based on facts and evidence as opposed to just perception by looking at the data coming from these pilots. And he can make sure that he has an active role in even working with partners to develop digital solutions. And it's a win-win, because businesses can learn more, and using Vegas as a good learning area. And then finally, Barcelona, Stockholm, we did a lot of work with Stockholm, a fantastic city. I want to say something about Barcelona, because I think the SIDEM, for those of you that are local here, know that it's a great digital democratic forum. There was a lot of concern about technology use in Barcelona. It's now used by 400,000 citizens to debate urban solutions, to participate, which I think is a good way to engage. And then Stockholm, kind of cool, they have their own area called Kista, which is like a little Silicon Valley, not so little, probably the second biggest in the world, but they are doing things like piloting drones, and drones could be seen like big brother to citizens, so what they're doing is getting the citizens to interact first, using the citizens sort of as their target group to see what they think and how to develop it. So instead of just doing it and imposing on people, which is a better way of doing it. So that's what I'd like to end with. I think, in summary, technology is essential. You have to use technology to transform and interconnect, but at the end of the day, it's about people, and you've got to get that part of the equation right. Thank you.
Thanks for the very insightful presentations and keynotes. And now we have 5 minutes for Q&A questions. Anybody wants to raise up the questions? Yes. Don't be shy.
Yes, any questions? So, it's all perfectly clear? You all agree? It's all about people?
And I actually have one question to discuss about.
Yes.
So in the presentation, you mentioned about that how it's important to also hearing feedback from the resident, right? And also the social media performance. But I'm quite curious about how can we evaluate the performance or the ROI that's in the social media, on the social media, and how we can improve it, monitoring, and turn it into a more proactive practice.
Yeah, well, there's a few ways. First of all, they are using social media apps and so forth, and you can measure social media and hits and length of time that people stay on it. So you have those kind of just web metrics that you can use. But a lot of people are doing it through even surveys of citizens, through the forums that we mentioned. Tel Aviv had a forum to ask what they thought, which didn't go so well, and then they had another forum which was much different. So it's about communication, interaction, using digital tools, how many people are using it, what kind of value are they seeing. Some of these tools give you input into fires in a city or crime in a city. So how effective is that in them reporting results that you wouldn't have known as fast? So they're measuring it all that way.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Question there.
Hi, Dominic Papa, I'm the Vice President for the Smart State Initiative for the state of Arizona. I have a question about the importance of building in scalability as a design feature from the very beginning. So I might push back on that last slide. I love Sherwood, love what he's doing up there. But we have this saying in Arizona, death by pilots, right? Pilots are great, but if you're not thinking about scalability from the beginning, what happens when those pilots go away? So can you maybe talk about the importance of thinking about scalability from the very beginning and kind of what you're seeing leading cities do in that area?
Yeah, yes, and that is a big issue, and we talked about that issue over our because the whole point is that you can have a company coming and do a pilot, and then they leave, and then the pilot's over, and there's nothing to sustain that program. So that's basically the problem, and so, there's a few ways around that. I think the key way goes back to what I do, which is economics, which is to try to make the business case. So I think it's about, my personal opinion, is that it's evidence-based government. It's about making the business case of these investments, showing which ones work, understanding how you can take that investment and make it sustainable to show continual ROI, and basically, make sure that you can monetize what you're doing. I think some of the financing tools that we were talking about, revenue share, whatever, could be a way forward that cities talk about using. But even with Las Vegas and the pilots, because I asked him that question, he thought that some of the ones that he's getting benefits already. He was learning, for example, that they need more signage. There's a lot of traffic deaths because of wrong way that he didn't know about. So he's even getting benefits, even though it's a pilot that's going to end. So, but I take your point. It is a challenge. I think it comes back down to innovation with business partners, and I think it's about understanding how to finance and monetize that investment.
So I think the time is up, but we have a networking session like that later. So if you have any question, please raise up later. Okay. So and now we are now welcoming our next guest speakers, Mrs. Berman to the stage. Yes.
Furniture move. We'll do intros while we wait. Turn us on. Are we on yet?
The technologies is just one of the tools, but how we can really use the technologies and let the residents, the governments know how to use it is also very important. And the smart city, the whole project is very huge. So how to implement the project in the cities is also a very big challenge. And so we have a conversation with an expert here, and maybe please give us the introduction of yourself and share your background, please.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I can't hear myself, so if folks in the back, if someone could wave if you could hear me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So I'm the CEO of an organization called CityTech, which is an urban solution accelerator based in Chicago, but we work with cities mostly in the US, but some here in Europe. And we focus on co-development and design of solutions, primarily IT and advanced analytics for cities, from mobility to infrastructure management, even in the health and human services space. Prior to that, I was the CIO for the city of Chicago for about 8 years, and had the benefit of sort of launching CityTech, really to shout out to the gentleman from Arizona, to get away from the death by 1,000 pilots. So we focus on designing scalable solutions, and while we use pilots to test them, we design for scale and maintainability from the beginning.
Great. So in terms of the smart city concept, I would like to ask, because different citizens, they hold different expectations or the image or the blueprints of the cities that they live in. Can you share your opinion in this, what's your blueprint or what's the imagination of the ideal smart city?
Right. So I think I've been asked this question probably more than any other, and I've been working in the smart city space for probably more than 15 years. And I actually don't think that there's one universal blueprint or one answer to what's the perfect smart city, because every city has its own unique culture, right? For every city that is represented here in this room, the right smart city solutions for your city are going to be different than they are for my city, Chicago, than they are for London or Shanghai or Dubai. Because technology should support the business needs of the residents, right? The cultural perspective of the residents and the government that live there, right down to, frankly, Lou mentioned the importance of security, which is complemented by privacy, right? The privacy perspective of a culture is inherently specific to that culture. So you could take the same solution and implement it in Chicago and implement it also in Singapore. And because of the differences in those two cultures, the specific implementation nature of that exact same technology is going to play out differently in those two cities. So smart cities is simply the umbrella name that we've given for using these emerging technologies to make cities happier, healthier, and more efficient, right? Serve their residents better. And that's just going to play out differently in different cities based on the cultural context of those cities. So the best smart city is going to be the best implementation of those technologies for that city. Now, there are guidelines, and actually, frankly, Lou gave a great outline of them, that all cities need to take into consideration, right? What is the ROI? How can you fund these things in a long-term view so that they're sustainable? How are you thinking about security? How are you thinking about the skills of your government workers to maintain and manage these solutions? How are you thinking about the acceptance of your residents to engage with them? Those answers might be different in your city, but you need to ask and answer all of those same questions no matter what city you're in.
Yes. And so, as we just mentioned, that actually how we use the technology to solve the problems is vary from cities to cities, right? And we really have to listen what the residents is, what's their pain points, what's the most urgent problems that they have to solve. And we also learn from the last keynotes that actually there are different stage of the smart city. There's an implementer, there's an advancer, and also there's a leader. And I would like to ask, so do you have any experience? Can you share any experience to when facing this different group? Is there any programs that you used before and it's success?
Right, so the resident engagement part can't be any more important because these solutions really aren't helpful if your resident isn't happy with them or doesn't adopt them. So Chicago has been implementing a program called the Array of Things for actually a little bit over 9 years. It started off as an experimental IoT research platform. It's a multi-sensor platform that's being deployed across the city. It's actually in multiple cities around the world now, but it's designed to capture primarily environmental data about the city, as well as information about the movement of cars and pedestrians and other vehicles, to give you a feel for the context of the city, right? How healthy the city is and where movements are going. This was a first-of-a-kind project when it started. It's still quite unique, but to give you an idea of the sensitivity of a resident, all of these sensors are in this 2x4 foot box, right? This big, that are up on traffic poles. So they're very visible. They're also bright blue and painted with a pattern like the Chicago flag, so we're not hiding them. So resident engagement was critical. And we have an established methodology in Chicago called civic user testing, which borrows from traditional methodologies around end user testing for technology programs and methodologies around traditional civic user engagement, to bring technologies, especially complex technologies, to our residents and gain their input both early in the design phase and then later in the testing phase. And we used that approach and continue to use that approach with this program from the very beginning as we rolled it out across different neighborhoods. And the engagement was omni-channel, as Lou recommended. And you could engage in person at sort of in town hall meeting style, you could engage online, you could send us questions like in writing, in pencil if you wanted. And there were a couple of key factors about that engagement. One, we answered every question in writing on the website. So there were thousands of these, so if you think about that lift in terms of effort, but even when you can't respond to a piece of input from a resident in the sense that like take that comment on board, you need to respond to it and explain why you can't make that change. Because if you're asking for input from a resident and it simply goes into like the black box of government, that resident's never going to engage again, and you just simply can't have that if you want ongoing engagement from the resident. We also committed to not putting these nodes into a community if that community didn't want them. Now, we haven't had that happen, but I think simply making that commitment and putting ourselves out there as a technology team and saying, you know, if your community doesn't want this, we won't go there, I think really sort of highlighted the fact that we wanted to roll this program out in partnership with residents. And then finally, one other aspect of the community engagement is we developed there's a companion high school curriculum to this program that has a semester of sort of IoT development where the high school kids build a very similar multi-sensor node and deploy it on their high school campus, and then a second semester of sort of biology statistics where they take the data gathered by the nodes and analyze it and then compare it to the data we're collecting from the sort of enterprise level nodes around the city. And that's deployed at the same time that these are deployed in the community. So you have engagement at the high school level, which frankly gives us about, give or take, 30 to 40 high school kids to work as kind of apostles of our program out there talking about how exciting and how interesting it is. That gives us further reach kind of from the mouths of high schoolers that are pretty excited about the program.
So ensuring the proactive mutual communication is very important.
Yes.
Yes. But the smart city project is very huge and immense. And sometimes it's not about the technology, but it's about like, because it's related to enterprises, governments, residents, so like cross-unit communications within the government or other enterprises will also influence the result of the project, right? And do you face any challenges that you think have to make improvements or it can do better?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges I think around smart cities projects, especially when you're generating or sharing new data, and governments faced this, you know, in the early days of open data, right? Is the performance of your government might not look so good early on, and whether that's across government agencies or sharing that outside government agencies requires additional communication and collaboration with stakeholders. And I think the earlier you're out front with that technology, the better. And I think, and this is a less resident engagement or stakeholder management aspect than it is about integrating your IoT programs into your core technology operations, which is critical and something that I think has been missed quite a bit. So going back to my CIO days, a lot of your smart cities programs and many of your smart cities solutions are simply IoT solutions. And I don't say simply IoT in the sense that they are simple, they're not. But IoT solutions implemented at scale are enterprise technology solutions, and they need to be managed as such. And even if the pilot was done outside of your IT department, it needs to be implemented, if not by your IT department, in close coordination with your IT department so that it has the same support and management of traditional enterprise IT management disciplines and best practices. So I'll give you an example that is not from Chicago, but is a real world example from a major US city. So I won't tell you who, because we never want to share our dirty laundry. But so it was a male CIO, but he was implementing a commercial analytics platform across the city. They had done a pilot, it was a successful pilot, and he had put in place the ability to evolve from pilot to enterprise implementation. He moved to enterprise implementation, and he was actually a very good operational CIO. This was his third job as a CIO, and he immediately said, to the vendor, okay, we're implemented, we're ready to go. This is a very simple question. What's my patching schedule, right? I should be getting security patches monthly, maybe quarterly, it kind of depends on the type of software. And the vendor looked at him like he had, a clown hat on. Like, what do you mean we have to patch? Anyone who's ever run an enterprise IT shop has a multifaceted patching schedule that they're running all day, every day, 365 days a year. That is normal, basic, run-of-the-mill IT management. Just because this is an IoT analytics platform matters not. It should have a patching schedule that gets integrated with the department's overall operational schedules for maintenance. And like the vendor's perspective was, but we piloted this. This is an IoT solution, right? It's smart cities, it's special. It's not. This is scale technology management like anything else. Right? Here we talk about all the amazing benefits of smart cities, engage with the resident, special funding models. Yes, at the end of the day, your IT department has an incredibly important job to do to manage these solutions over time, likely for many, 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 many years. Because cities keep their IT solutions for decades. And if they are not properly installed and properly managed and patched, et cetera, right, within all of the operational models that your CIO is used to managing, they will fail. And it will either be a security problem or a management problem or a user problem, but they will fail. And that is actually one of the key challenges around scaling these, is that they are spread across a business department who is responsible for the business impact of the solution. They are oftentimes separated from the IT department, and there might be a special manager of them in the mayor's office or something. And it is a level of coordination across city government that is relatively new to how cities work, and that creates a level of risk that is, frankly, oftentimes not talked about or planned for.
So, yes, the perspective is very interesting, but from is there any suggestions that you think, 3 suggestions if you want to mention about, and yes, maybe can share to our...
Sure. I mean, I think that we'll see if there's the 3 suggestions. Were you a consultant? There's always 3. And again, I mean, Lou set this up really well. I think he's seeing these things in all the cities he talked to, because I think he talked about all these. The first one is around defining the ROI and not just the financial ROI, right? What's the overall impact you're trying to achieve? Define that up front. Make sure you can achieve it through a pilot, but then measure it through the scaled implementation. And that impact is both financial and qualitative in terms of what the resident is expecting from their government. The second is the resident engagement, because if they can't see it, if they can't feel it, if they don't want it, and if you can't verbalize it to them, you won't have their support. And then the third is planning for the long-time enterprise management of these solutions in exactly the same way you would for any enterprise IT system, in the disciplines that requires, but recognizing that for IoT solutions, that's likely across multiple silos of government. So that's a level of coordination that can be new for city government.
Yes. So the sharing is very practical and also very useful. And I believe there's some questions from the audience. Any questions?
It's hard to see. You guys are quiet.
So what about sharing more real cases with us?
So I'd love to share an example maybe of our current work, because it's a little bit different. And I'd be interested if this is helpful to what the folks in the audience are seeing. The work we do now is actually around collaborative co-development, because so many of the challenges cities are facing really can't be solved by one commercial partner or one university partner. So we were focused on the problem of flooding, or the ability that cities need to defer rainwater from their traditional water sewer systems, because they're just being overwhelmed by changes in rain patterns, often due to climate change. So we brought together a team from Microsoft, West Monroe Partners, which is a consultancy that does a lot of environmental work as well as other work, a startup from Boston that builds a number of different kinds of water absorbency sensors, and a couple of other teams. to build an IoT solution around understanding the effectiveness of green infrastructure. So things like absorbent pavement and bioswales and plants that absorb rainwater and hold it over periods of time. And use those sensors to sort of evaluate the effectiveness of the green infrastructure with a secure network to collect all of that data, and some management dashboards actually just built in Microsoft 365, since so many cities actually already have that implemented in their shop. And we do that integration ahead of time, right? Because most cities would recognize the benefit of all three of those components, right? Microsoft 365 is what it is. The secure network, most cities would recognize the need to protect their data across a network. And the absorption sensors were just collecting the data. I also believe that most cities, even if they had the skills capability to do that integration, would not necessarily define that solution architecture end-to-end proactively. It's just that kind of solution co-design isn't in the available sort of time that cities have in their day, frankly, right? Cities are doing their day-to-day firefighting and daily management. We piloted that in Chicago across 6 different sites, and actually it resulted in the world's largest urban sustainability data set, which is actually available on the city's open data portal. It's been used by 8 or 9 other cities to evaluate their own flooding situations. And we packaged that commercially through a couple of engineering firms, because it is something that has to be implemented within the physical infrastructure, right? So to sell this IT package, right, it has to come through an infrastructure firm. It's kind of logical. But it's actually a fairly quick and dirty way for cities who are having flood management problems to access technology already embedded in the infrastructure. So that's sort of been our hypothesis, is that if we do a little bit of integration up front, it's a lot easier for cities to consume a relatively low price flood management system, as opposed to how can I use 365 to help me understand my infrastructure management? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the idea of what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm. Anyone has some questions?
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate the time.
Okay. I guess it's rather clear.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time. And now it's our break time, and it's also the great opportunities for us to get networking and also raise the questions that you have and reach out to our speakers. So the next session is our panel, and will be started within 15 minutes. Enjoy yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rosa Baradei, and I will be the moderator of this panel focused on IoT enabling new urban management models. I am currently the Innovation Business Development Director for the public sector in I2CAT, a technological center focused on advanced internet technologies, and I've been fostering the innovation in cities for the last 10 years. And I'm very happy to participate in this 9th edition of the Smart City Expo World Congress. If we look back on the last decade, we would agree that we are living a digital revolution. And this revolution has changed, and it's already changing the way we operate and manage cities. And technologies like IoT have played a key role here. Cities today have an enormous amount of information available that allows cities managers to take smarter decisions, and therefore, new urban management models emerge on the scene. I am really excited to moderate this high-level panel with 5 exceptional experts that will share with us their vision on this topic. Let me introduce you the first panelist, Mr. Yonglu. Mr. Yonglu is the Vice President of Shanghai Lianshu IoT Company. And he has over 30 years of IoT industry experience and has had different managerial positions in HP, Cisco, and Brocade China and Asia Pacific region. Currently, he is the Director General of Shanghai Data Innovation Center and also responsible for business development in Shanghai Data Exchange and Shanghai Lianshu Company. And she's playing an active role in advocating data enablement on smart city initiatives in the Asia-Pacific region and around the world. Please, Mr. Yonglu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rose. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to be invited to join this panel group. So I'm trying to share with you a case study first to talk about how we leverage on the IoT technology, big data, and AI to build a new platform for the city management for the city of Shanghai. So because of the technology development and because of this new requirement on the city management, so we need to build up a new city management solution to cope with the challenges, specifically in China. Because of the urbanization rate is increasing dramatically, so in the next 5 to 10 years, there are about 200 million people will move from the rural area into the city. So we have encountered this kind of challenges. We need to have a way to manage this. So what we've done in Shanghai, actually, this is part of the project from the national level for digital transformation. We built a new, we call it smart city platform, which helps the local city government to manage the city in a much better way. So the fundamental thing we're doing is we try to leverage on the IoT technology and to build a sensor network in the city. Usually for the city management for those mega cities like Shanghai, we largely rely on the management model like we call it grid management, which means we cut the city into small cells, and in each of those small cells, we assign officers, we assign people on the ground to monitor everything happening in the city. That's very useful, but that's not enough. Now we can leverage on those kind of sensor network to help us to automatically identify those issues. So this specific project is for the Jingnan district in Shanghai. We are going to deploy about 200,000 sensors in the city to create some 30 different kind of scenarios to leverage on the sensor to help us to identify the issues. So on top of this, once we have those sensors deployed, we also work out a data lake. So in this data lake, the data is not only coming from the sensors, but also coming from the different government agencies and even those commercial data. So we have this kind of a data lake can support the whole city management job. We call this a subject data set for the city management. So on top of that, we will build a city brand, which will help us to manage the city, not only can identify issues, to manage those issues, and eventually we'll have the function to predict. So in Shanghai, actually, government has a very, the ultimate goal for the city management, people say there is a zero emergency, which means eventually we need to identify anything even before it really happens. So in this kind of pilot project we're doing for the Jingnan district covers 5 areas like the public asset management, healthcare, food safety, transportation, etc. Just make few examples, like in the residential areas, from the door access to the smoke detectors, environment detectors. Even in those residential buildings, we put the sensors into the water tanks on top of the building to detect the water quality. We'll build sensors into the lift to monitor the status of the lift. We build sensors onto the ground to detect if there is any flooding. We also build the sensors into those emergency exits to detect if there is any valid parkings. Even for those old buildings, most of the cases, the fire is caused by the old circuit. So we build sensors into the circuit to detect the voltage, the currency, and even the temperature. So by doing this kind of things, we can manage a community in a much better way. For those public assets in the public area, like on the main shopping street, government has a very high standard on the hygiene. They never allow those rubbish to be overflow from the trash bin. How can we achieve that? We build sensors into the trash bin. So during the weekday, maybe 75% full, it will send out a signal. And then we are sending people on the ground to get it collected. In the weekend, maybe 50% full, we will send out this kind of signal. So by doing this, we create a lot of use scenarios so we can manage the city in a much precise way. And eventually, on top of this, we will build this kind of city brand. The city brand can help the city management team to easily to locate where those issues are, and they have a much better, clear pictures. Use the 3D technology. So this is the implementation for this project. Cover 1 million people, 37 square kilometers. We deployed about 200,000 sensors. So this kind of project has lots of benefit for the livelihood services. We have some economic benefits. Eventually, it's very important we can increase the urban safeties. So this is real pilot cases we run in China, in Shanghai. After this implemented, we will replicate into different part of the cities in China. Or also, we can help work with other countries to see if they need this kind of services, we can provide help. That's pretty much wrap up what I try to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next panelist I want to introduce is TJ Costello. As Cisco's Global Director for Cities, Communities, and Transportation, TJ Costello works with cities and government and transportation organizations around the world. TJ helps leaders to identify strategies and solutions to address their operational challenges and leverage digital infrastructure effectively and securely.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Should we take a minute and let everybody stand up? No, we'll get started. What I wanted to talk about in this session a little bit is not just about the technology. Being from a technology company, that's usually what we want to start with. And certainly being from Cisco, we want to talk about the network and connectivity, but I also wanted to think about connectivity in a different sense. Cities and communities are really where we all live and where citizens are, and we live there so that we can connect with each other, and it's our experiences, how we get jobs, and we build families, and that is really needs to be the focus. And we're moving from a phase a pattern we've begun to see is customers are starting to get comfortable with the journey, and they're starting to really begin to focus on citizens. And it was probably said best, I think we've moved into what I would call this ironic phase, right? So where never before has technology been more important and needed, but for the most part, customers they don't start off and say, when we meet with them, hey, can you help me buy a smart, secure network? No, what they start off with, and they say, a leader will say, we need to build a better mobility network because I want to make sure that the buses are on time so that people can get to their jobs and they can get home to watch their kids' soccer games and such. They want to talk about sustainability and public safety, right? And what I thought I'd go through was some examples of the types of things customers are doing. But again, back to that idea of connectivity and about human connections. So imagine we have if you were able to come by our booth, you'll see a demo of the city of New Orleans, right? So imagine when you're planning a big birthday. I unfortunately have 50 coming up in the not too distant future. So you want to get together with friends and you're looking for a place to go. You want to find a city to go to. Perhaps you're planning the birthday party or bachelorette party to share and get together with friends. You might travel to the city of New Orleans and you want to go and experience that city. Well, at the same time, the city has to start to deliver better services, and they've got to ensure that what you're taking for granted is safety. So they've built up a real-time crime center so that they can help police respond to incidences as they come up and offload the data so in the event that there is an incident, making sure that the police and public safety officials are in where they need to be, right? So that's all about making sure that you can have a best experience. You'll continue to support that community and their economy will continue to grow. The other day, my son is 15 and he's decided he really likes cooking. So he was preparing some homemade pasta and we were putting some water together, and he knows the job that I've been in, and he's like, Dad, I've read a lot about climate change. It's really important to my generation, but how do I know the water quality is what it is? Because he's invited his friends over, and he's had his friends' parents over, and we've hosted them over for dinners, but he wants to make sure that the water that he's taking for granted, where he's building those connections with friends and family in the events that we have over, is high quality. One of the things we're beginning to see across the globe is regional consortiums coming together and connecting their systems that were previously only connected to deliver water services within their city, and starting to share that data amongst the systems so that they can start to better predict water quality and water availability as this issue becomes more and more important. The other one is, imagine you're a mother, you're working in a city in the state of Nevada. We're working with a group of cities where you're at work and you want to make it home for your daughter's soccer game. And 5 minutes is the difference between you getting there for her goal. Yes, sorry, we call it soccer in the US, so apologies to the Europeans in the room. You want it 5 minutes, your ability to get there 5 minutes ahead of time is seeing your daughter's very first soccer goal. You want to have that experience. You want to make that connection with your daughter. Well, there's a couple of communities that have come together in Nevada, and what they're going to start to do is start to share real-time traffic information for the first time ever, so that you can improve the trip time. You can leave your office and make the same meeting and get home in time for your daughter's soccer game. Those are the types of connections you want to build. And finally, the other example I would give is there's a city in Florida, and this is where I've started to enjoy where the market has gone. Customers now are coming to us, and they're beginning to focus on the citizen, and they're saying, hey, we're building up a new transportation center. We want to ensure that the services are delivered well, right? So we want to make sure that we have visibility, so they're building in a network, they're pulling data off, they want to see how people are moving around the facility. And what they want to be able to do is, when there's an NFL game, it's an NFL city, they want to be able to make sure that the police, they have the right resources and better planning. Over time, they want to take a journey. Next stage is they want to head down to start to connecting up the bus stations. And the reason they want to do that is the bus services are fixed services. But we all know that that when the cities are built out, they're built out over a period of time, and the economy can change. And as a consequence, you may need to make that service, just as simple as a bus route, a dynamic route. So you're going to need real-time data to assess how those services are being used, whether they're in a library, whether they're in a transportation center or a bus stop. And one of the things is technology isn't going to wait, right? So we've got programs like our country digitization and our Cisco Networking Academy, where we've realized we have to help governments make sure that not only are you as customers in cities able to do this, but you're taking your workforce with you and getting better prepared. And these programs are put together to help train people to get those next generation skills necessary to be part of it. And that's a really big, important component of it. And then finally, look, I would say this. Technology's not going to wait. Citizens aren't going to wait. There are going to be winners and losers in cities. I'm from a very large family. I have 20 nieces and nephews, and I have 4 nieces that have just graduated from college. They're leaving Western Massachusetts to move to the Boston area because that's where the jobs are. So they were educated. They grew up out in Western Massachusetts, and now they're moving into the metropolitan areas. And look, we've got to deliver and start to rethink so that there are not brain drains in rural areas, and it's not all coming into the city. So we've got to work together with government to be able to deliver better services, and you simply can't wait. So we welcome the opportunity to work with you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TJ. Our next speaker is Ms. Elisa Ronca. Elisa is Innovation Manager at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. With her passion for service design and user experience, she fosters the transformation of building technology towards a people-centric and value-adding instrument for all stakeholders. So, Elisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rosa. So I'm taking this down a notch to the building level and take you on a small journey on how we define smart buildings and how buildings can really contribute into the experience of the users. So we spend 90% of our time in buildings. That is a lot. That means that we cannot undermine the meaning of each and every building that we interact with during each day of our lives and during the course of our lives. Now, if we think about the journey, what has happened in terms of buildings, we started with what I like to call the human warehouses, the physical structures that we just use to, let's say, fulfill the basic needs in life. Luckily, we are transforming very rapidly into something that is more self-adaptive or self-healing or even autonomous from an efficiency point of view, and that is an interface to all the people and the users within that building so that it creates a better experience for them. So fluidity is really the key in terms of experience. Now, if we start thinking about what is a smart building, what are the use cases and the values that you can create in the built environment? We talk about the personalization of the environment. So we are all individuals, and we should see buildings as a possibility to also personalize the environment where we are most well, or where we feel productive, for example, in the office concept. We talk about locating things, finding people, finding assets, finding the spaces you need, being able to do what you need to do as quickly, as seamlessly as possible. Of course, we also talk about the efficiency of a building, the performance of it, whether it's energy, whether it's asset efficiency. This is, let's say, the traditional way of looking at smart in a building. And we talk about then the integration to the city level. So for example, through grid connectivity, how can buildings start contributing to the resilience of the entire grid? And if you multiply these kind of concepts in several buildings, you end up actually having quite a smart city. All right, so here's one use case of a Fortune 500 company who deployed in an office space IoT solutions and workplace applications. And what they found was that they could actually reduce their space by 20 to 30%. So that is a real measurable, hardcore KPI. That's a return on investment you can quantify to any C-level decision maker. But in addition, at the same time, they're able to increase the productivity of the employees by 26%. So all of a sudden, you are able to balance this extreme efficiency with a better experience. So you can justify the investment for the qualitative by the quantitative. And I think this is one key into deploying smart technologies. Because unfortunately, as the world still stands today, return on investment is often measured by numbers. Hence, you have to be able to quantify something. Then let's talk about another healthcare case. So here you can see a nurse's journey throughout a day in a hospital. And if you look at it, it does look rather inefficient to me, or I don't know if you feel differently. Now, if you think about what is the job of a nurse in a building, what is the experience that they are creating? They are there to heal the patients. They are there for the patients. However, when you look at this, you see that only less than a quarter of the time of the nurses are actually spent with the patients. Everything else is scrambling to find things or other operational duties. Now, with the deployment of IoT, you can actually make a much better experience for the nurse, definitely a better experience for the patient, because they actually can heal quicker and feel that they are taken care of. But at the same time, you can get the quantifiable results with such a solution, for example, asset tracking. Very simple solution in the healthcare environment, because you need less equipment, less maintenance, and you're able to, let's say, quantify, again, do the hardcore ROI. Third example is about the grid connectivity, or what we call grid edge technologies. So how can you use buildings as a buffer for the grid in terms of aggregating the loads, the power loads of a building, and use those as a buffer for the resilience of the grid? We have a great example of a shopping mall in Finland, actually, Celi shopping center, where they deployed such a stack of technologies to be able to use the tiny little microloads of the building, starting from individual LED lighting, and aggregate those together and offer that to the energy market. And by that, the owners of the building are getting almost $500,000 annual, all of a sudden new revenue or new income for them that they would not have received before, and at the same time reduce the carbon footprint altogether for the whole nation. If we implement this, we have a case where we're implementing several of these. We're actually decreasing 0.5% the whole carbon footprint of an entire nation. This is seriously a great benefit, not only for the owner with its ROI, but for the society as a whole. And we see solutions like this where buildings become prosumers in the energy market, also deployed municipality-wide. So it's not just an individual building. So with this being said, really when you want to make buildings smart, you have to create better experiences, less friction, more fluidity. But in order to do so, you sometimes need to get some quantifiable results, and this is achieved by this next level of efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Eduard Martin. He's the CIO and 5G Program Director at the Mobile World Capital here in Barcelona and Dean of the Official College of Computer Science Engineering of Catalonia. He's former Director of Innovation, Knowledge Society, and ICT Architecture in Barcelona City Council. And now, Eduard, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosa. Good afternoon, and thank you to come, and thank you to the organization to let me explain how the 5G technology can improve the IoT systems in the cities, in the smart cities, to provide people with the best conditions. In Mobile World Capital, we are working during all the year to provide the best conditions for the city of Barcelona to be one of the most important digital hubs in the world. We are working in innovation, we are working with talent, we are working in a reflection of our society, our digital society, and we have a technology program. My program is the 5G program in the Mobile World Capital. In the 5G program, we are working together with other public administration and also with private companies to get to main goals. The first one is to convert Barcelona in one of the most important cities in the task to deploy the 5G technology, and also we are responsibilities over the 5G National Spanish Observatory. What is 5G technology? 5G technology, in fact, is a big jump. It's a big jump from the older technology, from the 4G generation. In fact, with the 1G generation, we have the mobile phone. That was a big jump from the fixed phone. In the second generation of the mobile connectivity, we have the possibility to send SMS, text, in our phones. In the third generation, we have the possibility to change our phones with a little computer in our pocket to make possible to surf the web, to get emails, and also to have new applications, the apps. On the 4G generation, we have the possibility to enjoy with a media content, with a big quality content, and with the 5G generation, we will have another type of services based on the special characteristics of this technology. Especially, we see in the near future unknown services for complete the circle of the digitalization. In fact, we have three basic characteristics in the 5G technology. The first one is the low latency. We have the possibility to reduce the latencies similar to the wired networks, to the fiber optical networks. This is very important for the IoT systems, reduce the latency, especially in systems like mobility, smart cities in general, industry, health, emergencies, etc. The second one is the enhanced mobile broadband that increase in 200 times the capabilities of the 4G technology. And at the end, the capacity of the massive IoT connections. We will have around 1 million of devices connected in the best conditions in area of 1 square kilometer, for example. That is very important for the development of the smart cities in particular. We have also two big differences in the technological architecture in 5G. I have a little time. It's impossible to explain 5G in 10 minutes, but we have the possibility to implement the slicing, the concept of slicing, using specific slices, dividing the total capability of the transmission that is applicable to the IoT systems to offer for different services the best conditions. Also, we have the possibility to use the core of the 5G networks using the concept of this distributed computation based on the edge computing, combining the power of the cloud systems with the little clouds near to the final user. That is important also for the IoT systems. In fact, in the IoT applied to cities, we have the need high network capabilities that 5G can offer to the IoT systems. I know that currently we have a very good IoT system, but 5G technology can provide best conditions. Also, we have to improve in 5 areas. The first one is the possibility to build peer-to-peer networks, the communication between the devices, not only with the cloud. This is important, for example, for the autonomous vehicle. It's necessary that the vehicles can talk between them, not only with the cloud. We have also the possibility to provide massive matching communication, the possibility to have a lot of devices connected, or for example, networks in motion, the possibility to have always on roaming. This is the topic, okay? The possibility to have the best connectivity in all the conditions in the mobility. And also, we can offer with the 5G technology ultra-dense networks and ultra-reliable communications, another level of the safety in the networks. Okay, in the 5G generation, we can provide, in comparison with 4G, 3 basic topics: machine-to-machine interactions, wearable underlay networks, and sensor network, improving the sensor networks, the actual sensor networks. I think that in the next future, in the near future, we will see a smart city connecting with a lot of different types of networks, actual or current networks with current protocols and standards, but also introducing the power of the 5G technology. In another order of things, 5G technology is a big opportunity to develop new business, because 5G technology, 5G infrastructure needs a high investment, but the revenue of these investments, we think that will be greater than the investment, because we will have a lot of opportunities in the area of the software, for example, the development of new applications in the edge computing, to develop new smart city systems. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eduard. Our next speaker is Val
I
Jelny,
like your presentation.
that today is representing the LoRa Alliance. Val is a passionate, innovative technology evangelist. Applying over 30 years of telecom technology experience, Val helps utilities, cities, and service providers with their digitization transformation. As part of the Brunata Mainol Zener Group, he serves as the corporate member representative to the LoRa Alliance and is a proactive role player in different committees and working groups. So, Val, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rosa. If I had to ask a question, a common question to all of you here today, and I asked you to put up your hand, if you live in a smart city today, which of us lives in a smart city? Which of us don't know? Thank you for your honesty. Which of us use smart applications or smart city applications or services on a daily basis? Which of us does not use a smart device? So I'd challenge you and say that each and every one of us already is part of a smart city, smart town, smart ecosystem. And I'm very proud to be part of the LoRa Alliance, which created a protocol called the LoRaWAN protocol. And this was brought together by a group of people who had a vision and a strategy and a belief in a LoRaWAN as a protocol, as a game changer in the Internet of Things. And a subset of that being smart cities. And of course, a bigger subset being digital transformation. So what I'd like to briefly discuss with you today is a little bit of an introduction to the LoRa Alliance. We launched at Mobile World Congress in 2015, not far away from here actually. And within 6 months, we had 160 members. And this was proof in the pudding that it's people that make a change. It's people that bring the Internet of Things to the market. It's different companies across the value chain that get interested and get excited and motivated about a technology, enough to start playing that technology and enough to start trying to utilize that technology and lever the advantages it can bring to smart buildings, into smart cities, and all areas of the vertical markets that Internet of Things now seems to be playing in and people are very familiar with. In 2016, we achieved 400 members. And in 2018, we tipped over 500 members and over 100 operators, network operators globally. And the question you should ask is, what is a network operator when it comes to IoT? Or more specifically, what is a network operator when it comes to LoRaWAN? Oh, sorry, I've gone a little bit too fast. And we found that a network operator can be many things, but it takes all parts of the value chain to be able to enable someone to become a network operator. You need semiconductors, modules, devices, gateways, connectivity, applications. You need to take the data from somewhere, send it to somewhere, and create that magic word, value, out of that data, for which we need to monetize that value from. And so the LoRa Alliance brought together a group of different companies. It attracted a lot of different companies. Cisco recently joined our LoRa Alliance. We have traditional telco operators, we have private companies, we have public companies, we have people who are experimenting with LoRaWAN as a technology to test use cases, to do the digital transformation that we are pushing for smart buildings, for smart cities, for smart industry, for smart utilities, metering and so on. And what we're finding along this journey is that after 5 years of maturity, we've reached a peak where suddenly we've become the de facto standard for IoT. That's a pretty bold statement, the de facto standard for Internet of Things. The proof in the pudding is that a lot of operators who are talking about competing low-power wide area network technologies traditionally would come from the traditional technology avenues for carriers. We're also using LoRaWAN to prove the use cases or disprove the use cases for which they needed to implement in their cities, their buildings, etc. So currently, LoRaWAN enjoys about 100 plus LoRaWAN network operators in about 100 plus countries. And it's a little bit difficult and a little bit vague, I know, because it's difficult to count how many private networks there are out there, as well as public networks. We are in every market vertical that you can imagine, and we're also continually attracting new customers, new companies, because of the core characteristics of our protocol, which is long distance, low power consumption, which is a game changer. Things can work on batteries. They don't need to be changed out every 6 months or 3 months. Of course, that battery life depends on the use case application. It's an unlicensed band, and this is a game changer for some companies who don't wish to use traditional connectivity methods. They want to either build their own network, or they want to run or have the security of having their own network for which they get to control their devices and the different solutions, and more importantly, the different services that they want to roll out. Whether it's indoor in buildings, as my colleague Lisa mentioned, whether it's outdoor in Shanghai, as Yong mentioned, or as Eduardo mentioned, in the smart city environment where multiple different technologies are being used in the same place to serve different services. If you're not already aware, the sweet spot for LoRaWAN is very low data, long distance, and battery powered. We don't replace any other connectivity technology. We don't profess to do that, but we're extremely complementary with the existing connectivity that is out there and the connectivities that is coming around the corner, like 5G. So what are some of those use cases, and what are some of those services that we're doing? So in France, Veolia have taken on a project to change out 3 million smart meters over 3 years. And their goal is to achieve 70% of the readings from water meter data remotely by 2027. In Shanghai, the ThinkPart China network has already deployed 150,000 smart city sensors, which improve the safety, security, and the quality of life of the city residents, which include many different services such as waste management or pollution detection, parking, etc. In the US, we have Machine Q. It's a company launched by Comcast, quite massive, and they're utilizing LoRaWAN across many different cities. I think it's 22 plus cities in North America presently, where they're improving traffic flow through managing smart parking correctly. And of course, they've identified a new revenue source because they're more efficiently now issuing traffic infringement fines. In Montreal in Canada, LoRaWAN is being used to digitize the signage in each of the bus stations, so we don't need to change paper and post schedules. the updated scheduling and the real-time traffic flow is being posted on the bus and in the shelters in real time. And lastly, the biggest case we have is an indoor footprint case in smart buildings. So this is 50,000 devices deployed today across a network of 5,000 gateways on a footprint of about 45% population coverage in Germany. It's the largest LoRaWAN network, the largest LoRaWAN, private LoRaWAN network in Europe. And it's rolled out by the company Mittelzehner Connect, part of my group, the Mittelzehner Brenner group. And of course, if you want to learn more about our devices, more about our technology, learn more about the value of our ecosystem and what we can do for you, I invite you to come to our booth at E511, say hello, and have a chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Val. Now it's time for the questions. So if you have any question from the audience, please.
Sorry, I don't understand.
No questions from the audience? No? Okay, let's start then. Elisa, I have a question for you. As you said, we spend 90% of our time in buildings. And how do you measure the experience in smart buildings? Which are the KPIs you use in the different types of buildings you're working with?
That's a very good question. I think it's an industry hot potato at the moment. Everyone's talking about it. Oh, how can we start to quantify something that's in essence majorly qualitative? But there are certain ways. One easy way is to think about how can we reduce friction and how can we quantify that. Time saved is a very easy example. So in an office environment, for example, how many minutes can you free up for productive work? In the hospital environment, how many minutes a day, and hopefully even closer to hours, you will free up for healing patients? So that's one thing that you can actually also quantify. But I do believe that when we talk about buildings as an experience and how buildings really, let's say, contribute to whatever is being done within and the well-being within, it's really about the perception. And that's where we get to the qualitative survey, perception of your productivity, for example, because we know we can all relate. We are all employed somewhere, most of us at least. And if you feel more productive, you perceive yourself to be more productive, chances are either the quantity or the quality or the level of innovation or collaboration or something positive comes out of it. So therefore, it's a very tricky question, but I think it's easiest to start with, for example, time saved. That's something you can quantify. But in essence, we have to start looking at return on investment in a different way. And also, I like to think of ROI. It's not only a return on investment, it's also the risk of inaction. So really, where do we quantify the risk of not deploying these kind of solutions?
Okay, thank you very much. And no question from the audience? No? Yeah? One there.
So, hello. I'm Thanasi Konomou. I come from a Greek company, Indracom Telecom. We design smart city solutions, and of course, connectivity among the sensors is a very big issue for us. We heard a lot about 5G. To myself, 5G is like Brexit. We've been talking about it quite a long time, but we don't see it happening soon, and we don't see the way it will happen. Although we've seen some demos in some countries. Meanwhile, the municipalities and the cities have strong interest in investing now in solutions. So for these projects, we use LoRaWAN, we use NB-IoT, we use maybe some cellular connectivity. And I want to ask, how will 5G fit into this implementation? Because it's, may I say, too late to catch the train in smart cities implementation. So this is my question.
Good question. This question for me? Yeah. I think that we have to run a long way to apply this 5G ending technology because we are working, all the industry are working in the final standard of the 5G, as you know. Currently, I think that we have to collaborate with different technologies, with LoRa and another one, to get the best solutions in the best time. But in Barcelona, for example, we developed more than 10 pilot projects in different areas. For example, health, for example, buildings not, but health or mobility. And we can observe that the 5G can be a good technology at the end, because 5G can reduce the power consumption like other technologies. 5G can be a good solution for the rural areas, for example, in the concept of 5G last mile, for example, getting connectivity from the fiber to optical and then deploying 5G. And in the cities, if the cities has fiber optical is the best friend of 5G technology. We can combine different technologies, but we have a long way. But at the end, I think during the last years, we will see mixed solutions with different types of connectivity working together to get the best services.
Any estimations when 5G will be ready?
Sorry?
Any estimations when will 5G be ready
yes.
for?
I think that we will have 2 years to test and to develop the standards. I think 2022 is a good year to start with the 5G standalone mode and to put involved the new solutions over this technology.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I add something? Okay. So in terms of 5G applications, I think we may have some suggestions. So in China, we are doing those kind of videos. 5G can play a major role. Like in the ambulance, if you put the cameras in that, then the hospital can clearly understand what the patient situations are. Second is for the smart retail environment. So in those convenience stores, if you install more of those kind of sensors, the number of connection is one of the key advantage for 5G. So this will be another use cases currently can be implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Are there more questions from the audience? Yeah, perfect.
Hello. I'm from representing the city of Dublin. Wanted to ask, so there are two sides of the coin. There's like the private sector and the public sector. And from the public point of view, we always want things to be open. So it's like open data, interoperability, and stuff like that. While the private sector, there's like proprietary intellectual property involved. So we're trying to reconcile the both of that, because we want to use modular systems where we can take from everything and interconnect in an easy way for a city. But at the same time, you have a lot of vendors who are saying like, use our system and it's gonna, you're gonna have to take it on for a couple of years. There's some sort of lock-in and we can't connect it with another system. And we're starting to see that the data from different sort of departments which might not have made a connection before, like waste management and traffic, we're starting to see some correlations that data can be used from both sides, but we need it to be open. So what is the next step for meeting this challenge, like this IP and openness?
Can I? Okay, thank you. Before I hand this over to TJ, because I think the ultimate answer to your question is data lakes, data pools, data storage, and building platforms in a city or by a region where the accessibility to the data is where the value is. The data itself and the trends and the patterns that we derive from the data is where the value is. In Dublin specifically, Trinity College Dublin has a LoRaWAN network called Pervasive Nation. And what they've done is they've taken on the initiative to do exactly what you're talking about. Offer this network to both public and private sector and see what happens. See who's interested, who's going to be using it, how different services or how different solutions can be built to utilize that network. And before the gentleman from before with the 5G question sat down, what some of the evidence that we're seeing is that there's no one-size-fits-all technology for everything in the IoT ice cream flavor, right? So depending on which ice cream flavor you wish, you're going to be using low-power WAN technology for certain use cases, public and private, to 5G, very fast, very high bandwidth services and solutions. But that data has to go somewhere. That data has to be managed somewhere, it has to be secure, it has to be accessible by the right stakeholders at the right time. which I'll now hand over to TJ to comment on.
No, so I think as customers become more comfortable and more mature, this question comes up less and less. In fact, the accessibility of the data I'm seeing is often not the biggest challenge. If you have policies, privacy policies, et cetera, that might limit that, and merging those two together can create some challenges. But in general, when customers that put together either a civic data trust or have a policy put together, an open data policy, put it together in a format that you must comply when you're procuring things. And when you have those policies in place and you're doing the procurement model, those two together generally solve the problem, and the accessibility is critical, right? Because you do want to make that insights. While you may be taking some data, we've seen customers where they're putting a system in for pedestrian safety around a Vision Zero initiative, and suddenly, without us even knowing, the urban planning team and the economic development team is using that same data to realize, hey, wait a minute, where we've had a high degree of pedestrian deaths, and they're going to change the policy about putting a walkway in the middle of a block, right? Because that's where they were. The near misses were there. It's obvious when someone dies in there. They use that data to begin to solve that problem. Simultaneously, the economic development saw the same value in the data and said, hey, we need to market this data to developers because there's a lot more people in this area of the city than we realized, right? So forgive me, I think 5-10 years ago, that seemed to be more pervasive. I think when customers have the right policies and procedures in place in partnership with their procurement, generally those problems solve. And quite honestly, if you have a vendor that's not doing that, my advice would be pick another vendor.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so time is run out so fast that it's time for the final wrap up. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa.